right, so you're looking to get more fluent in English.
Sounds great.
We've got a really interesting piece here for our deep dive today.
Okay.
It's all about speaking English more confidently, and it's got like 10 tips. So we're going to try to extract the most practical and intriguing advice from this piece and
Sounds good.
help you level up your English skills.
Awesome.
So the first tip is think in English.
Yeah, okay.
I have to admit, that sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Right.
I mean, how do you just like switch your brain like that?
Well, it might sound odd at first,
Yeah.
but the idea is to stop translating in your head and actually start like thinking in English.
Okay.
So you're essentially rewiring your brain.
Rewiring, is there like science behind that or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it all comes down to neuroplasticity,
Mm-hmm.
which is your brain's ability to form new neural connections.
Interesting.
So when you consistently think in English, you're strengthening the pathways related to that language.
Okay.
It's like building a mental muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So instead of translating every thought from my native language to English, I should try to like form those thoughts directly in English.
Exactly.
In my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
The source actually gives an example. Try describing your morning routine in your head, but do it entirely in English.
Oh, okay. So like,
I can see how that would be good practice. But what about writing? Does that help too?
absolutely. The source actually recommends keeping a thought journal in English and just write down anything that comes to mind. Thoughts, observations, ideas, even dreams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a workout for your brain, helping it become more comfortable operating in English.
I like that. It seems less intimidating than like trying to hold full conversations in English right from the start.
Exactly. Building fluency is a process.
Right.
And this is a great way to start incorporating English into your daily life more organically.
Speaking of incorporating English, the next tip is all about surrounding yourself with the language. So this is where that immersion idea comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source really emphasizes making English a natural part of your daily life. So think about the things you already do, like watching movies,
Yeah.
listening to music.
Scrolling through social media.
Yes. Now imagine doing all of that in English.
So it's not just about dedicated study time. It's about like integrating it into activities I already enjoy.
Exactly.
Right.
Even something as simple as switching your phone's language settings to English can make a difference.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, you're constantly being exposed to the language, even passively.
So let's say I love listening to podcasts. Could I just switch to English language podcasts?
That's a great example.
Okay.
Or if you're into movies, try watching them with English subtitles.
Right.
Instead of dubbing.
Got it.
The idea is to find ways to make English a natural part of your day, not just something you do for an hour of studying.
I'm already starting to see how these tips build on each other.
Yeah.
You start thinking in English, then you surround yourself with it.
Right.
What's next?
Well, a lot of people find speaking to be the most daunting part of learning a new language.
I can imagine.
And so the third tip is to practice speaking daily.
Okay.
But how do you do that when you don't always have someone to talk to?
That's a really good point. I know I'd feel self-conscious talking to myself in English
Sure.
out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Do they recommend like finding a language partner?
They do mention language partners later on.
Okay.
But they also highlight the value of solo speaking practice.
Okay.
So the source suggests talking to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
describing your surroundings out loud,
Okay.
or even recording yourself speaking.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and these days we have technology to help us too.
Right.
Think about AI chatbots.
Mm-hmm.
They can provide pretty realistic conversational practice.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or language exchange apps where you can connect with native speakers.
Right.
Lots of options.
I hadn't thought about using chatbots for that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So we've covered thinking in English, immersing ourselves in it, and practicing speaking. What else is there?
The next tip is about sounding more natural and fluent, which can be a real challenge for English learners.
Yeah.
And the source recommends learning phrases, not just individual words.
Okay, why is that more effective? Isn't learning more individual words better?
It's not just about the number of words you know, it's about how you use them.
Okay.
Think of phrases as pre-built Lego blocks for conversation.
Okay.
Instead of struggling to piece together individual words, you have ready-made chunks of language that sound more natural and fluent.
So how would this work in practice?
So let's say you want to compliment someone on a movie.
Okay.
Instead of just learning the word impressive, you would learn the phrase, that movie was really impressive.
Okay. I can see how that sounds more natural.
Right.
Less robotic.
Exactly.
Do they have other suggestions for like putting this into practice?
Yes, they recommend creating a phrase notebook where you just collect useful phrases for different situations. You can review it regularly and even practice using the phrases out loud.
Right.
It's a great way to build confidence and fluency over time.
That's a really practical tip.
Yeah.
I like the idea of having that go-to collection ready to use.
It's all about building those language muscles and making English feel more automatic and intuitive.
So we've tackled thinking, immersion, speaking, and phrases. What's next on our list of fluency boosters?
The fifth tip focuses on a skill that's often overlooked, improving your listening skills.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure we can all relate to the feeling of being lost in a conversation because someone's speaking too fast.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like trying to catch butterflies in a hurricane?
Exactly.
Any advice on how to improve in that area?
Well, the source suggests a few techniques. First, listen to as much English as possible, whether it's podcasts, audiobooks, or videos.
Okay.
The more you expose yourself to different accents and speaking styles, the better you'll become at understanding them.
So just like with speaking, it's about practice and exposure.
Exactly. And if you're watching videos, try using subtitles at first.
Right.
It can help you connect the spoken words with their written form, which can improve your comprehension.
Gotcha. They also mention a technique called shadowing. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
So where you try to repeat exactly what a native speaker is saying?
That's it. It might seem strange at first, but it's a great way to train your ear and improve your pronunciation at the same time.
Okay, I think I've tried that before, but it can be pretty challenging.
Start with slower content,
Right.
like podcasts designed for learners,
Right.
and gradually increase the pace as you improve.
I'm definitely going to try that again.
Yeah.
So far, we've got some really solid tips.
Yeah.
Thinking in English, immersing ourselves in it, practicing speaking, using phrases, and improving our listening. I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed, though.
Sure.
Is there a way to, simplify all of this?
Don't worry. It's all about taking it one step at a time.
Okay.
The next tip is actually all about simplifying vocabulary expansion. It's called Expand Your Vocabulary with Context.
So instead of just memorizing lists of words.
Right. Rote memorization can be tedious and ineffective.
Yes.
The source emphasizes learning new words within real-life examples.
Okay.
So when you encounter a new word in a book article or conversation, pay attention to how it's used in that specific context.
So it's about understanding how the word functions in a sentence.
Exactly.
Not just its dictionary definition.
Exactly. It's about making connections and building a deeper understanding.
Okay.
So instead of just memorizing a word in isolation, try creating flashcards with example sentences that show you how the word is used in different situations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like learning a word in a story.
Yeah.
It becomes more memorable because you have that context to associate it with.
Exactly. It's a much more engaging and effective way to build your vocabulary.
This is great. We're really starting to dig deep into some practical techniques here.
Absolutely.
And speaking of practical, the next tip is all about leveraging technology.
Yes.
To enhance your learning experience.
Love it.
Which in this day and age, it would be silly not to.
Exactly.
There are so many amazing language learning tools out there.
Absolutely. The source specifically mentions use English apps and online tools.
Right.
We're talking about apps like Duolingo, Babbel, Memrise, and countless others.
Right.
They offer interactive games, quizzes, and exercises that can make learning more fun and engaging.
Yeah, I've tried a few of those apps before, but I never really thought of them as like a core part of my language learning routine.
Yeah, they can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
These apps offer personalized feedback, track your progress, and adapt to your learning style.
That's cool.
What's really great is that many of them focus on specific skills.
Oh, okay.
Like pronunciation or grammar.
So it's about finding the right tool to fit my individual needs.
Exactly.
And learning style.
Exactly. You can even use voice recognition apps to practice your pronunciation, or grammar checkers to refine your writing. And let's not forget about the wealth of resources available online like BBC Learning English or Voice of America.
Wow. There really is a tool for everything.
There is.
I'm starting to see how all these tips are fitting together like pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah.
We've got thinking in English, surrounding ourselves with it, practicing speaking and listening, building vocabulary, and using technology.
That's right.
What else is there?
The eighth tip emphasizes the importance of human connection and community.
Okay.
It's join English speaking groups.
So it's not just about solo learning.
Learning a language thrives in a social environment. It's about interacting with others, practicing your skills in real-life situations, and building confidence.
Do they recommend specific types of groups?
The source suggests various options: online forums, social media groups, language exchange programs,
Wow.
meetups, and virtual conversation clubs.
Wow.
The key is finding a group that aligns with your interests,
That's a good point.
whether it's movies, books, cooking, or travel.
I love that learning should be fun and engaging.
Yes.
Finding a community that shares your interests sounds like a great way to make it more enjoyable.
Exactly. When you're enjoying yourself, you're more likely to stick with it and see progress.
We've covered a lot of great tips,
Yeah.
and I'm feeling pretty motivated, but honestly, I still get nervous about making mistakes
Sure.
when I speak English.
That's completely normal.
Okay,
And it brings us to the 9th tip,
okay.
which I find incredibly reassuring. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Easier said than done.
Okay.
I know that making mistakes is part of the learning process.
Exactly. The source actually encourages us to embrace mistakes
Okay.
as valuable learning opportunities.
How can I reframe my thinking about making mistakes?
Yeah.
It's so easy to get discouraged when I mess up.
Think about it this way. Every time you make a mistake, it's a chance to learn and improve. It's feedback that helps you pinpoint areas where you need more practice.
Okay.
The source even suggests keeping a mistake journal.
A mistake journal.
Yes, jot down your mistakes, analyze why they happened, and come up with strategies to avoid them in the future.
Wow.
It's a proactive way to turn those mistakes into stepping stones on your path to fluency.
I'm starting to see how shifting my mindset can make a big difference.
Yeah,
Mistakes aren't failures.
right.
They're opportunities for growth.
Exactly. And that leads us to the final tip, which ties everything together. Stay consistent and have fun.
Consistency seems to be like a recurring theme in language learning.
Absolutely.
But how do I stay motivated and avoid burnout?
It's about finding a balance between focused effort and enjoyment.
Okay.
The source emphasizes that even dedicating just 15 minutes a day
Okay.
can make a significant difference over time. The key is to make it a habit.
So small, consistent steps are better than like sporadic bursts of effort.
Exactly. And remember, learning should be enjoyable, not a chore.
Right.
The source suggests finding activities that you genuinely find engaging, whether it's watching stand-up comedy, listening to interesting podcasts, or reading blogs on topics that fascinate you.
I love that. It's all about finding ways to make English a natural and enjoyable part of my life.
Exactly. And when you're having fun, you're more likely to stick with it and see results.
Wow, that's quite a collection of tips.
It is.
I'm feeling really inspired to put some of these into practice.
I love it.
It's amazing how much helpful advice is packed into just 10 tips.
It is.
But I think what stands out to me is the importance of mindset.
For sure.
It's about believing in yourself, embracing the learning process, and finding joy in the journey.
Absolutely. And with the right mindset and consistent effort, fluency is definitely achievable.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
You have.
We've explored 10 tips, delved into the why behind them, and even touched on the importance of mindset.
We've barely scratched the surface, though. There's so much more to uncover.
Before we move on, is there anything else from these first 10 tips that you find particularly insightful or surprising?
I think the emphasis on thinking in English and surrounding yourself with the language is incredibly powerful. Those 2 tips alone can make a huge difference in your fluency.
I agree. And I'm really intrigued by the idea of a mistake journal.
Yes.
It seems like a practical way to turn those oops moments into learning opportunities.
It's all about reframing our perspective and seeing mistakes as valuable feedback.
Okay, well, let's take a quick pause here, and then we'll come back to tackle the remaining parts of this deep dive.
Sounds good. All right, so let's jump back into our deep dive on English fluency.
Okay, sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground already, but
Yeah,
there's still so much more to explore.
I'm ready.
One area that often trips people up is pronunciation.
Okay.
It's one thing to know the words, but it's quite another to say them correctly,
Right, especially in English,
especially in English.
with our interesting spelling.
Oh, tell me about it.
I still remember feeling completely baffled when I first saw the word colonel written down.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't match at all.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a head scratcher, but good pronunciation is key for clear communication. It's not about sounding perfectly native-like.
Right.
It's about making sure you're understood
Right.
and avoiding confusion.
So how can we improve our pronunciation without like getting bogged down in all the technicalities?
Well, you remember that shattering technique we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Mimicking a native speaker is a fantastic way to work on your pronunciation. You pay attention to their intonation rhythm and stress patterns.
It's like becoming a vocal chameleon.
Exactly.
Can I just use any audio or video for that?
Absolutely. Podcasts, movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, anything goes.
Okay.
Find something you enjoy listening to.
Right.
And try to match the speaker as closely as possible.
Okay, that sounds fun. Actually, do you have any tips for making shadowing more effective?
Try recording yourself while you're shadowing.
Okay.
Then listen back and compare your pronunciation to the original speaker.
Right.
You'll be able to hear where you need to adjust. Oh, that's a great idea. I never thought to use recording as a pronunciation tool.
It can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
But shadowing can feel overwhelming at first.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're struggling, try breaking it down. Focus on mastering the sounds of individual letters first.
Okay.
Then move on to words, then phrases, and eventually full sentences.
So it's all about building up gradually.
Exactly. You wouldn't expect to run a marathon without training first, right?
Right.
Same with language. Build a solid foundation and the rest will follow.
Okay, that's reassuring. Speaking of foundations, I think it's time to talk about grammar.
Okay.
I know it's essential,
It is.
but it can also be really intimidating.
Oh, I hear you. English grammar can seem like a tangled web of rules and exceptions.
Yeah.
But don't worry, you don't need to become a grammar expert overnight.
So it's not about memorizing every single rule.
Not at all.
Okay.
It's more about understanding the basic principles and how they work together.
Okay, so how do we get to that level of understanding? More drills and exercises? Well, practice is definitely important.
Okay.
The more you expose yourself to correct grammar, the more natural it will become. Think of it like learning a musical instrument.
Okay.
You wouldn't expect to play beautifully just by reading about music theory, right?
Yeah, you need to practice.
You need to practice those scales and chords.
Exactly.
And just like music practice, grammar practice doesn't have to be boring.
Okay, good.
There are tons of fun games, quizzes, and interactive apps out there that can make learning grammar more engaging.
And don't forget about reading.
Yes!
Immersing yourself in well-written English can do wonders
Absolutely.
for your grammar.
Reading exposes you to a wide variety of sentence structures and grammatical patterns.
Right.
It's like osmosis.
Yeah.
You absorb the rules without even realizing it.
Speaking of immersion, we talked about that earlier in relation to like surrounding yourself with English.
Right.
But how can we make that like a consistent part of our lives?
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in daily routines and forget to prioritize language learning.
You're absolutely right. It's about making a conscious effort and being intentional.
Okay.
So try carving out specific time slots in your schedule for English immersion, even if it's just like 15 minutes each day.
So it's like scheduling a meeting with myself for English.
Exactly. And look for opportunities to integrate English into activities you already enjoy. Listen to English music while you commute. Watch an English language movie with subtitles on the weekend, or even switch your social media feeds to English.
So it's about finding those little pockets of time throughout the day.
Exactly.
And using them strategically.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of social interaction.
Okay.
Join a conversation group, find a language exchange partner, or even just chat with English-speaking friends or colleagues whenever you get the chance.
So it's about making English like an active part of my life.
Exactly.
Not just something I study in isolation.
Exactly. The more you use it in real-life situations,
Yeah.
the more confident and fluent you'll become.
Okay.
Now, speaking of confidence,
I know that many learners struggle with the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. It's that voice in my head saying, what if I say something wrong? What if people laugh at me?
It's a common fear.
Yeah.
But remember, mistakes are an inevitable part of the learning process. Everyone makes them, even native speakers.
I know logically that mistakes are okay.
Yeah.
But it's still hard to shake that feeling of self-consciousness.
Think about it this way. Every mistake is a chance to learn and grow.
Okay.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Okay.
You wouldn't expect to be perfect on your first try, would you?
No, you're bound to have a few wobbles and falls along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And each time you fall, you learn something new, you adjust your approach,
Right.
and eventually you master the skill.
Right.
It's the same with language.
That's a great analogy.
So instead of fearing mistakes,
Yeah.
you should see them as valuable feedback.
Okay, I like that. Now, speaking of improvement, I think it's time to talk about goal setting.
Okay, love it.
I love goals.
They give you direction and something to strive for.
Absolutely.
But goal setting for language learning can feel a bit overwhelming.
Sure.
Where do we even start?
The key is to start with the end in mind.
Okay.
Ask yourself, why am I learning English? What do I want to be able to do with the language?
So it's about having a clear vision of what I want to achieve.
Exactly. Do you want to travel the world and converse with locals?
Yeah.
Land your dream job that requires English proficiency? Watch movies without subtitles?
All of the above.
Yeah.
I can see how defining my why will help me stay motivated.
Yes.
But what about setting specific goals? It all seems so big and vague.
Sure. Once you have that ultimate goal, break it down into smaller, more manageable milestones. Instead of saying, I want to be fluent in English,
Right.
set a goal to hold a 5-minute conversation about your hobbies.
Okay.
Or to read a simple English language book.
So it's like creating stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Exactly. And celebrating those smaller achievements along the way can boost your motivation and keep you on track.
I love that. It's all about making the journey feel less daunting and more achievable.
Exactly.
But even with clear goals,
Yeah.
I think consistency is still a challenge.
Sure.
How do we make English like a regular habit?
You're right. Consistency is key. It's not about cramming or studying for hours on end.
Right.
It's about making English a regular part of your daily routine, even if it's just for 15 minutes at a time.
So it's like watering a plant.
Yes.
You wouldn't expect it to thrive if you only gave it water like once a month.
Exactly.
It needs consistent hydration to grow.
Our brains need that consistent exposure to the language to absorb and retain information. So schedule your English practice into your calendar.
Yeah.
Just like you would any other important appointment.
Okay, so treat it like an appointment.
Yes.
Makes it feel more official.
Exactly.
Less likely to skip it.
But sometimes, even with the best intentions, it's easy to lose motivation.
Oh, yeah.
So what can we do to stay engaged and keep that passion for learning alive?
That's a good question.
That's where the power of community comes in.
Okay.
Finding your tribe, connecting with other English learners can make a world of difference.
I've heard that having a supportive community can really help boost motivation.
It can.
But where do I find these like-minded language enthusiasts?
There are so many options.
Okay.
Join online forums or Facebook groups dedicated to English learning.
Okay.
Attend local meetups. Participate in a language exchange program, or even just strike up conversations with English-speaking friends or colleagues.
So it's about finding those spaces where you can connect with others
Exactly.
who share your passion for the language.
Exactly. You can share tips, practice together, and celebrate each other's successes.
That's great.
It makes the journey so much more enjoyable and rewarding.
I love that. It's like having a cheerleading squad
Exactly.
for your language learning adventure.
There you go.
But even with a supportive community, there are days when I just don't feel like studying or practicing.
Sure.
How do we overcome those slumps and reignite that spark?
That's where the importance of fun comes in.
Okay.
We've touched on this before, but it's worth repeating.
Yeah.
Language learning shouldn't feel like a chore.
Right.
It should be an enjoyable and engaging experience.
So how do we inject more fun into our English practice?
Think about activities you already enjoy and find ways to incorporate English into them.
Okay.
Love movies? Watch them in English with subtitles.
Okay.
Music buff? Listen to English songs and try to sing along.
Yeah.
Play language games, watch funny English language videos, or even try telling jokes in English.
Laughter is the best medicine, they say.
Exactly.
And if it helps me learn English, that's a bonus.
Absolutely. Now we've covered a lot of ground in this section.
Yeah, we have.
From pronunciation and grammar to goal setting and community building.
It's a lot.
But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with one important thought.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What's the key takeaway? So what's that important thought?
It's that learning a language is a journey,
Okay.
not a destination. It's a process of continuous growth, exploration,
Right.
and discovery.
I like that. It's not about like reaching some endpoint.
Right.
It's about constantly evolving
Exactly.
and expanding your skills.
And there will be bumps along the way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Moments of frustration, self-doubt, and maybe even like a desire to give up.
Definitely relatable. Those roadblocks a few times.
Yeah, but how do we push through those tough moments and stay committed to the journey?
Right.
It all comes back to mindset.
Okay.
The source material doesn't explicitly mention this, but I think it's the underlying thread that connects all these tips.
So it's not just about the techniques themselves.
Right.
It's about like the attitude we bring to the learning process.
Absolutely. If you don't believe you can learn English, if you're constantly putting yourself down,
Yeah.
no amount of tips or tricks will magically make you fluent.
It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation.
Exactly.
No matter how beautiful the structure is, it won't last
Right.
without a solid base.
So how do we build that solid foundation?
Yeah, how do we cultivate like a growth mindset
Yeah.
when it comes to learning English?
Well,
I know for me, I get discouraged really easily when I make mistakes
sure.
or feel like I'm not progressing fast enough.
That's a common struggle.
Yeah.
But remember, mistakes are not failures.
Right.
They're valuable learning opportunities. They're signposts showing you where you need to focus your efforts.
So instead of beating myself up,
Yes.
I should see them as feedback.
Precisely. Each mistake is a chance to learn, adjust, and improve.
Okay.
You know, your brain is making new connections every time you step outside your comfort zone.
It's like those aha moments.
Yes.
When something finally clicks.
Yeah.
It might take a few tries, but eventually you get there.
And that feeling of accomplishment when you finally master something makes all the effort worthwhile.
Speaking of aha moments, I think it's time to revisit one of the most intriguing tips we discussed earlier.
Okay.
Thinking in English.
Yes, that's a powerful technique.
It is.
It's all about training your brain to process thoughts directly in English without relying on translation.
It's like switching your brain's operating system
Exact.
to English mode.
And while it might feel awkward at first, the more you practice, the more natural it will become.
It's like building a mental muscle.
Exactly.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
And the amazing thing is when you think in English, you're essentially immersing yourself in the language 24/7.
Even when I'm not actively studying.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like having an internal English tutor constantly whispering in your ear, guiding you towards fluency.
I love that. It's about making English a natural part of your mental landscape.
And speaking of making English a natural part of your life, let's brainstorm some fun and engaging ways to practice.
Yes, because let's be honest, sometimes studying can feel a bit like a chore.
It shouldn't. Learning a language should be an enjoyable experience.
Right.
So let's get creative.
All right, let's see. What about like turning your commute into an English immersion zone?
Oh, yeah.
You know, listen to podcasts, audiobooks, music.
Great idea. Or how about challenging yourself to watch a movie or TV show in English without subtitles once a week?
I like that. And what about language learning apps and games? There are so many fun options out there.
Absolutely. And for a more creative outlet, try writing a short story or a poem in English, or start an English language blog or journal.
It's all about finding what sparks your interest.
Yeah.
And makes you want to keep learning.
Exactly. And don't forget the importance of finding a supportive community.
Right.
Surround yourself with people who encourage and motivate you.
Whether it's family, friends,
Yes.
or fellow language learners, having that support system can make a world of difference.
It's about celebrating your successes together and offering encouragement when you hit a snag.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything. From mindset and pronunciation to grammar and community building. We've really explored the ins and outs of English fluency.
We've barely scratched the surface, though. Language learning is an ongoing journey full of endless possibilities.
Before we wrap up, is there any final message you want to leave our listeners with?
Remember that learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never stop exploring. The joy of language learning lies in the journey itself.
That is beautifully said. And remember, you are capable of achieving fluency. Believe in yourself, trust the process, and most importantly, have fun along the way.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be having this conversation in fluent English. Until then, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep the passion for language alive.
That's a wrap for this deep dive into the world of English fluency. Thanks for joining us, and happy learning.